Hello and welcome to this special bonus episode of The Dairy Edge. Teagasc are running a weekly Let's Talk Dairy webinar series, which is also being made available as a podcast. On this week's webinar, Stuart Childs was joined by Superintending Veterinary Inspector Damien Barrett to discuss the holistic approach to animal health.
Okay, good morning ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this week's Let's Talk Dairy. Today we're going to focus on health, and I suppose in light of the restrictions that are about to be imposed again in relation to coronavirus, it's kind of appropriate or very apt in the topic itself, because it's very similar in, I suppose, people that have had nothing to do with animal diseases or anything down through the years wouldn't have had a realization of what's going on in the background in terms of trying to control and be ahead of diseases coming into the country, etc. But COVID has made people very aware of pandemics, obviously, and the spread of disease within the country from a human point of view. So today I'm joined by Damien Barrett, who's a veterinary inspector with the Department of Agriculture, and Damien is going to be talking about the One Health approach, so a holistic approach to animal health, with a view to reducing antibiotics, which we would have touched on a couple of weeks ago in relation to selective dry cow therapy as part of that One Health approach. And also about the exotic diseases, I suppose, that come in, which coronavirus would probably fall under from a human health point of view. So Damien has a good few slides with maybe a little bit longer than our normal weekly webinar, but it's worth going through it because there's some very interesting information. And I suppose Damien will make people aware of things that are happening within the department that people maybe never have had an awareness of as well, in terms of early detection of disease, and as we were just saying before we went live there, trying to stamp out these diseases before they become a big issue within the country and so forth. And there's also some serious implications maybe for some diseases getting into the country. So people being aware of that from a very early stage and notifying the department in adequate time is an important piece of it as well. So Damien, I'll ask you to share your slides. I'll encourage people to put in questions as we go along through the Q&A. It's a good opportunity to ask questions of Damien. He's a good handle of the situation within the department, given the role that he has. And the One Health thing is a very important piece from a human health point of view as well, because that reduction in antibiotics is going to feed into better health outcomes, I suppose, when people are using antibiotics into the future, because antibiotic resistance has been associated with misuse of antibiotic within the animal population. So Damien, I'll ask you to share your screen and you can start away. And as I said, I'll encourage people to ask questions as we go along. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Stuart, and thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to your audience. I've talked to you as part of Animal Health Awareness Week. It's an initiative by the department to raise awareness of the importance of animal health in the context of exotic diseases, and we're also doing this in conjunction with World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. And I really want to talk about this holistic approach to animal health called the One Health approach. And the One Health approach, really, it's about this concept that the health of people, the environment, and animals are inextricably linked. And if we kind of just delve into that a little bit more, say for instance, in terms of something like antimicrobial use, overuse of antimicrobials is going to lead to antimicrobial resistance. And whether that's in overuses in human medicine or animal medicine or veterinary medicine, that's going to give rise to resistance. And once these resistance bacteria they can actually get into the environment, say through manures and water. And like another One Health concept is the issue of disease vectors, like changes in the environment, say, can lead to changes in the habitat for vectors. Say, for instance, midges. If we've milder winters, that's going to mean that we could have midges for longer, and midges are an important vector for the transmission of Schmallenberg virus and blue tongue virus, which I'll talk to you about a bit later on. And then the other thing that probably gets overlooked is the importance of the nutrients that meat and dairy products, etc., provide for the well-being of the human population. So all these things, the point is that all these things are inextricably linked. So really, if we are going to talk about reducing antimicrobial usage and enhancing health in a holistic manner, it really is about putting the like of these points into practice. That's biosecurity, practices for disease prevention, reducing antimicrobial usage, and sustainable production systems. Now, I think the farming community was probably well aware of what biosecurity meant, but I think the general population it's become a bit, they've learned about it since the advent of COVID. And really what this is about is there's two elements of it. And those of you that are involved in Ione's control programs would be aware of this. The first element of biosecurity is bioexclusion. This is keeping disease outside, say, the farm gate and the perimeter and the footprint of the farm. And then biocontainment is containing the disease within certain cohorts within that. And as I say, Ione's is a prime example of this. If there's Ione's in the cows, the whole idea of the biocontainment of it is to ensure that it isn't transferred to the next generation of calves through calf snatching and feeding them milk replacer from very early on. This is important for the department, and the department has its own biosecurity strategy, basically setting out the parameters in which the outline of what biosecurity means for the industry. And it is something that the Chief Veterinary Officer in particular is very aware of and very, very keen on. In terms of disease prevention, the first thing here I want to talk about is reducing stress. If we look at this graphic here of the non-stressed calves and the stressed calves, one of the first things is that the stressed animals need more nutrients, and as well as that, they're going to be more susceptible to disease. Stress leads to the release of cortisol, which is an immunosuppressive, and I suppose we all think of the common stressors and the like of weaning, transport, mixing, say, animals from different herds, and I think they're probably something that we think of more in a beef context. But we also should think of other stressors that may affect, particularly, say, at a dairy level. One of these might be, say, insufficient feed barrier space or insufficient lying areas. And the animals that are going to be affected by this are going to be the ones at the bottom of the pecking order, more often than not heifers. And this can have knock-on effects for the health and productivity of the heifers. This slide here, what I want to talk about here is the importance of nutritional management. And in a dairy context, the transition period here, the period from which the cow goes from a non-lactation state to a lactating state. And there are quite significant metabolic changes in those, and big metabolic demands on the cow as she transitions from that. And it's important, if that's not managed properly, that can give rise to quite a few nutritional problems. One of the like of ketosis, where the output of the cow doesn't keep up with the demand, the energy demands from the output doesn't keep up with the inputs in terms of feed, and that in a clinical case will give rise to a substantial drop in milk drop, but also at a more at a subclinical level, it can give rise to immunosuppression. These ketones as well are immunosuppressive, and it can give rise to subfertility. At the other end of that spectrum is over feeding of, say, concentrates, or not so much, not necessarily overfeeding, but the sudden introduction, giving rise to acidosis, and in chronic states, this can give rise to laminitis and liver abscesses. Here I want to just mention about the importance of mineral deficiencies and the role of minerals in optimizing health. Like the first three there, I'm sure you're quite familiar with: calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus. These are interlinked, and then what I should have included in that is not so much a deficiency of those, but an excess of potassium, is going to have a negative, it's going to reduce magnesium, and anything that these all are going to can manifest in hypocalcemia. So it's important to get these three elements correct. Probably relatively low levels of calcium in a pre-calving diet, to relatively low levels of calcium in a pre-calving diet to mobilize calcium off the bones, but also relatively high levels of or supplementation with phosphorus and magnesium. Iodine is mentioned here because it's quite an important mineral in terms of weak calf syndrome. If there's a shortage of iodine, it can manifest in calves that, like, even you see that they get plenty colostrum. Their colostral antibodies are can be quite impressive, but they will be short. They can be weak. They'll be weak no more than with selenium, and they will, no matter what you do, they're hard-minded. And when you're getting into a number situation, you want to do everything you can that these animals are born strong and are able to suckle or consume colostrum. Anything that's going to give rise to weak calves is going to give rise to that lack of vitality, and you really want those calves at that stage in life. You really want the calves in that stage of life to have as much life in them as they possibly can. Another issue as well with iodine is that it can lead to weak heats, and heifers in particular. You will see that this issue of the calving process slowing down, and you may lose, kind of leading to stillbirths. I mentioned as well there copper and cobalt. These are important as well to get good thrive. Now, I'd say you're all blue in the face listening about the importance of vaccination in the context of COVID, but I think one thing that we might be learning from the COVID situation as well is that vaccination in of itself is not always a panacea for all problems. One thing that we would have learned from COVID is the whole importance of herd immunity. Now, I know herd immunity got a bad rap early on in the COVID situation, because I think there was that idea that herd immunity was going to be based on letting the disease rip. But herd immunity really it should really only be applied in the context of vaccination. And there's a threshold there of about 80% of a herd needs to have antibodies from vaccination for it to be effective. And if you're below that for whatever reason, it's not you're not going to get the immunity that vaccine was designed for. As well as that, there's other issues that come into play here in terms of husbandry biosecurity, and going back to minerals. One of the worst mineral problems, I think, or one of the worst calf scar problems I think I ever came across involved a very, very profound selenium deficiency. And this herd was actually using a scar vaccine, but they were so low in selenium that the animals weren't really reacting to the vaccine or producing antibodies. And another key element of vaccination is that if ever there's a medicine where you do exactly as it says on the tin, this is it. If the vaccine needs to be followed, the instructions to the letter of the instructions. Anything other than following the full instructions is not going to give the immunity that's required. I just want to touch on the issue of antimicrobial resistance here. And as I say, it's an important theme of this week, Animal Health Awareness, Antimicrobial Awareness Week. Antimicrobial resistance is considered to be the greatest public health threat that's going to face humanity in the next 50 years. It's thought that it's felt that it's going to cause more deaths in people than cancer in the coming years. Now, just to explain what antimicrobial resistance is that the whole premise of an antibiotic, antimicrobial, is that they kill bacteria, and they basically eliminate the bacterial infection, and it's the bacterial infection and septicemia resulting from that make people sick. And indeed, antimicrobials have saved hundreds and millions of lives of both people and animals. That's the upside. Now, the downside of antimicrobials is when they go about killing bacteria, just on that Darwinian kind of concept of the survival of the fittest, they don't kill them all. There's going to be, say, in this slide on this graphic on the extreme left, there's the red bacteria remain, and these become the dominant bacteria, and over time these become dominant, and they are resistant to bacteria, and if these proliferate, you're going to have stronger antibiotics, as it were, to deal with these. But there will come a time where you run out of antibiotics, and that's when the issue of antimicrobial resistance comes into play.
I suppose the big thing there, Damien, is that there's actually only a very small cohort of families of antibiotics available.
Yes.
Is the issue, isn't it? So,
yeah.
And that's why these critically approved ones are being kind of taken away. So people would have been used to some drugs being available for stock, and now they can't get them anymore because they're seen as being critical for human health.
Yes.
And they've been removed from animal use for that purpose.
Yeah, that's exactly the point, Stuart, is that these are becoming frontline in human medicine, and they're being saved for human medicine. And but now, this slide I have here, if we look at this graphic here, that these critically important antibiotics have been removed over a couple of years. But as time has gone on, the health and welfare of animals has not declined in proportion to these being taken away. So that's a good thing. And the reason that's declined is that the husbandry and the preventative measures and vaccinations, I suppose, all these things have taken the place of these to keep the health in place. And that's what's responsible antimicrobial use comes down to. It's using as little as possible. And what that means is reducing the likelihood of disease through putting in herd health plans. And like, the truth of the matter is, these are being, as in the famous words of Willie John McBride, it's getting your retaliation in first, taking proactive action to stop the disease getting a hold in the herd, through vaccination, good husbandry, and biosecurity, and then it's using them as necessary. And like, no one is saying that antimicrobials should be taken away from the animal health, from the farming circle, but it's that they're used prudently and smartly, and used as much as necessary based on diagnosis and prescription, the correct dose for the full course. And the full course is whatever, like, say for instance, you've got an animal that the drug is prescribed for 5 days, it's looking grand after 3, and it might even be difficult to they mightn't like being getting the full course, as you know. It's important to see that out for the 5 days. And the other thing is, as you're all aware of the importance of observing withdrawal periods to avoid residues. And just to clarify, just to make sure everyone is clear on this, resistance and residues are two completely different things. Residues is the remnants of the antibiotic in the system, and they're going to be metabolized, and they're going to be worked out of the system of the animal over time. And that's generally speaking, from what we're seeing from our antimicrobial residue program, there's very little. There are very few residue violations. Resistance is different because this is just basically changing the bacterial flora of the animal, so that you're getting bacteria out there that actually are resistant to the bacteria. It's, as I said, it's that Darwinian kind of thing of the survival of the fittest. The other thing I want to mention here as well is that the issue of how health relates to sustainability and production efficiency. And I think this is something that's important to remember in the context of all this talk at the moment about the need to reduce cow numbers from a greenhouse gas perspective. I think we need to think a bit more about the importance of getting the animals we have working more efficiently. And so anything that causes ill health is going to cause reduced production efficiency. So I think we need to look again at the importance of maximizing the health of the animals so that you're going to get the optimal efficiency from them. And just to put this in context, one figure there is that when the Scottish industry was looking at eradicating BVD, they calculated that the eradication of BVD would reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the Scottish cattle population by 3%. But as you're all aware, 3% on the face of it may not look that big, but it's fine margins. It's 3% anyway. And if you look at if you put that with other diseases, that you can look at that further. As well as that,
it's important to point out there, Damien, as well, that every percentage that we can get is going to be important, because this is part of the Teagasc MAC curve as well. Improving animal health is going to improve productivity. Yes. So there's several angles of it where it comes into play. Obviously, animals aren't sick, so they perform at a higher level. The other big thing is probably from a beef animal point of view, they may finish faster, and that's a significant help in terms of reducing greenhouse gases. So every little helps, as Tesco says, so we'll take it all if we can get it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a game of very fine margins, and every as you say, every little helps, and everything you can take, you take it. And just I've mentioned here about the issue of disease. I remember talking to a vet, an Irish vet that's working in Africa, and she...
I think I've lost your volume there for us, Damien, for some reason. Maybe hit mute by accident.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. Sorry. I was just saying there that in the developing world, parasitism is considered the greatest hindrance to production. Now, we have the medicines here to deal with parasitisms, wormers, flucicides, all that. But what we are seeing is development of resistance to these drugs, no more than with antimicrobials. So again, it's important that these are used smartly and prudently, so as to minimize the risks of antiparasitic resistance. And like that's especially important for a grass-based production systems like ourselves, where we do depend on grass, and these parasites are going to be picked up off grass. Now, what I want to mention here is the importance of the Irish production or the Irish National Animal Health Status. Now, I've kind of mentioned this here, and I am conscious that my presentation might be a bit longer than usual. I think we've mentioned all that, and I think you get all that. But like, there is a very important connection between animal health and agri-food. And just to put this in context, like these are the figures here of the value of livestock related exports to the Irish economy. So like it is the biggest indigenous industry. It's also a very important thing from the point of view of public perception, and the way, and especially if you're dealing with higher value markets, like the consumer in higher value markets puts a premium on welfare. So it is important that that they see that we're making every effort to protect and enhance the health and welfare of our animals. As well as that, there's important public health elements of this, like, and that's some of the issues we're going to cover in some of the webinars for Animal Health Awareness Week. The TB eradication program is around so long that I think we may forget why it came in. That was to eradicate TB, which was quite an important zoonosis in the 50s. Likewise with brucellosis. That was a zoonosis, like, and that, okay, pasteurization did a lot to deal with those, at a farm level, and for people working in meat factories in particular, and farmers, these were public health threats. But as well as that, one thing we're seeing as well is that, particularly in the context of access to the China market for beef, the whole issue of BSE, like, thankfully for most people, BSE is a distant memory, but unfortunately it's not a memory for us in the department. And when we're trying to get access to these third country markets, particularly China, we're seeing this particularly with the Asian markets. They're very they're very keen on the whole issue of BSE in cattle and scrapie and sheep, and but like the point I'm really getting at here is that this can be, if these were to emerge, they can be something that close a market. And what I've put on here is an example of the certs. That this is an example of the China cert of what the diseases that they want assurances from, that the country is free of, like, say, foot and mouth, rinderpest, contagious bovine pleural pneumonia, lumpy skin, peste petit ruminant, etc. But then from a farm level, they want freedom from these other diseases here highlighted, blue tongue, brucellosis, etc. So it's important. These are things that probably the average farmer on the street probably doesn't cross his mind, and he's lucky that these other things don't have to cross his mind in terms of getting markets for Irish produce. But they are something that we have to deal with, and we have to provide assurances on. What I want to talk about here next is the animal health surveillance website. And this is a resource I'm sharing with you that we try and get out current news here on a variety of topics. That's this current news page here. We have, just to give an example, some topics here: parasitic gastroenteritis. We would see, when we see increasing levels of worms, and say both stomach worms and fluke worms, our colleagues in the labs, we ask them to get onto us when they see these, and we post these on this website. That Haemonchus contortus, that's in a lamb. Haemonchus contortus, when I was in college 25 years ago plus, wasn't really a disease that we considered was in Ireland. We thought it was kind of something of the closest we got was the southwest of England, but it has emerged in that we've seen it in the southeast, and this year we've seen this case seen in the Athlone Regional Veterinary Lab. This is otherwise known as the barber pole worm. It causes severe anemia in lambs. Not so much an issue in cattle, in fairness, but it's just an example. And then what we have here is we do this fluke antibody prevalence study over the summer months, from July until November each year, just to get a handle on the exposure of lambs to fluke. Now, the importance of this is that, okay, these are a sentinel. These really are picking it up. These lambs are born in 2021, and they're slaughtered in 2021. So basically, if they have antibodies, they had to get them in the current grazing season. And over this, we just really plot where when it emerges. This may vary a bit from year to year. In a particularly wet year, you can see this coming a bit earlier, but invariably this is going from east to west as the rainfall goes. We have quarterly reports from the regional veterinary labs by species there, just summarizing the main conditions by quarter. That's by sheep, but all of this is combined into the All Ireland surveillance report, which we compiled in conjunction with our colleagues in AFBI in Northern Ireland. And this really is a summary of the disease situation that's seen by the regional veterinary labs, or 6 regional veterinary labs in Sligo, Athlone, Backweston, Kilkenny, Limerick and Cork. I'm not going to dwell on these for too long. And then we've got some other pages of interest, and these are about our surveillance programs that are of interest to trade partners that I was alluding to earlier on, when they when their staff are researching Ireland of what we have and what we haven't got in terms of disease and programs we have for showing proof of freedom, that information is there. Now, I just want to emphasize the importance of the early detection of disease, and this whole Animal Health Awareness Week came about as a result of a review of our early warning surveillance system for the detection of an emerging exotic disease, or the re-emergence of a disease that we've eradicated, such as brucellosis. The key thing about early detection, in the words of Mike Ryan, that WHO doctor, like early detection is, you need to work fast and efficiently early, and maybe getting in the controls early before the disease takes hold is crucial. And passive surveillance is the foundation of that. Passive surveillance is like what I've referred to there, farmers and vets getting cases investigated in their local regional veterinary lab. But for that to work, you need to have people to be aware, first of all, that the labs are there to do that job, and secondly, to be aware that when they see something untoward, to go and to get it checked out. So that's the objective of this week we're having this week. Syndromic surveillance, really, that's something that's developed, and it's based on big data, where milk records, for instance, mortality records, that kind of big data are interrogated, but that's only in the development stage. It may be something that'll augment it, and we have evidence to show, when we looked at the emergence of Schmallenberg retrospectively, that analysis of milk data might have identified that 6 to 8 weeks sooner than the first clinical case, but that's something that's still in development. But just to give you some context about, if you don't move fast and move early, what could happen. The foot and mouth outbreak that occurred in 2001, that cost the Irish economy 210 million euros. Now, if you remember, that gave us good warning. That had been simmering on in the UK for a couple of weeks, and we had 3 cases in Northern Ireland. And the case that was detected in County Louth at that stage, I think that fitted within the surveillance zone of the case in South Armagh. So we were well warned. And the other thing was that was a part of the country that was relatively easy to seal off. Like, you had mountains and it was a peninsula. So even at that, it cost 210 million euro. There has been an analysis done that could have cost up to over 5 billion euro if it had been let rip, if you like. I just want to bring attention to a disease now that's probably of concern. It's probably the exotic disease that's causing us a lot of concern at the moment, and it's blue tongue. This is a midge-borne disease, and there are 2 ways there's 2 ways really that it's going to be introduced to the country. It's a midge-borne disease. Midges can be blown for up to 400 kilometers. So in theory, it could be blown across from France. And especially so, more likely it could be blown across from the UK if there was an outbreak there, but thankfully they're free of it. But the other way it can be brought in is through the purchase of stock and cattle from France, say. And this is a higher risk, say, if it was to occur during the midge season. And if it occurred during the midge season, got into the native midge population, then it will take off. And this is a graphic really of what we found about Schmallenberg, again a midge disease that was introduced to Ireland in 2012. We reckon it was probably blown across from the UK, and it re-emerged again in 2016. And in 2012, this was a disease predominantly of the south and the southeast, and in 2016, when it re-emerged, it went a bit farther northwest. The reason we feel it didn't go as far in 2012 was that after its introduction, it was introduced we've calculated in August 2012, that there was a cold spell in October. I think it was October, but it was a particular. If you remember 2012, it was an awful year, and there was a cold snap that probably killed off the midges, and that's why it was relatively confined. But if that was to have happened in May, it's likely that it would have crossed the country. And why is this important? In the context, if this was blue tongue, in the context of blue tongue, the restriction zones, because this is a midge-borne disease, extend to 150 kilometers. And within those restriction zones, there's mandatory vaccination and housing orders. But there are trade implications, and it could mean the loss of live exports. And if this was to happen, say, for instance, we've given this example, if it was to happen, say, in the middle of the country around Athlone, for instance, most of the country, exports from most of the rest of the country would be curtailed as a result, and even into part of Northern Ireland. So I suppose what I want to talk about finally here is the Animal Health Awareness Week, which is the subject of what we're having a series of podcasts, and we're really trying to raise the awareness of animal health for this week. And I want to thank Stuart again for allowing me to talk to you. This again is a series of webinars, and the first of these is going to be on this evening, and this one this evening is about antimicrobial resistance, and it's coinciding with the EU AMR Day, or Antibiotic Day, and there's a global week of antimicrobial awareness. Speakers this evening are a combination of vets, farmers, and human health doctors. Professor Martin Cormican from NUI Galway, who is the HSE lead on AMR, and Dr. Nuala O'Connor, who is the Irish College General Practitioners lead on AMR. This talk on responsible antimicrobial usage by John Hanrahan. He's a pig farmer, and pig farming is probably one of the heavier users of antimicrobials, but the lessons that he's learned and applied here are applicable to all types of livestock farming. And his vet, Mike Burke, is also going to speak. And I'm afraid
they also have a fairly significant dairy enterprise as well, Damien, the Hanrahans. So there would be, I think I've heard something in relation to how they've implemented transferred some of the learnings from the pig side of things into the dairy side of things as well on the farm. So it would be interesting.
That's all the better. And our other speaker that night, we're having to sub Simon Doherty. Simon unfortunately succumbed to COVID, and we're getting James Russell from the British Veterinary Association to give a talk about how agriculture is leading the way in terms of antimicrobial usage reductions. On Monday, we're having a talk specifically on zoonosis, and this really, zoonoses are those diseases that are transferable from animals to man, and our talks there. And I suppose the concern about that is that if there's a spillover, like we had a spillover of COVID into people from animals, the impact can be pretty devastating. We've got speaker there. The first speaker from the UK chairs a risk assessment group on zoonosis. Margaret O'Sullivan is the HSE lead on zoonosis. Anita Zentel from UCD is going to talk about tick-borne diseases as well as animal diseases. These are quite important zoonotic diseases. And Ciara Feeney or Ciara Reid is going to talk about a zoonotic disease, specifically salmonellosis as a result of feeding raw meat to dogs. This talk here is probably of most interest to the dairy farming sector. That should be Ailish Moriarty, sorry, some of you may know her from Kerry Agribusiness. She was also an Nuffield scholar who did a study on the use of bulk milk testing as a herd health screening tool. You also know Finola McCoy, I'd say, from Animal Health Ireland, topic probably of interest to yourselves. Fiona Lovett's talking about reducing an initiative to reduce antibiotics among practitioners, and James is talking about parasites. And the last one here is probably the most dramatic. Philip Robinson is going to talk about his own experience of diagnosing foot and mouth. And on a personal level, he was living on the family farm in County Antrim at the time, and that meant that he couldn't go home for 2 weeks. We're also going to have talk about blue tongue. AMR, Mike McGann is going to talk about the personal experience there. And we've got Gemma Daly from DARA talking about African swine fever. I'm very conscious that I'm probably running over time, so I think that's all I have to say. Stuart, if you have, I can stop sharing there.
Yeah, you can do, yeah. So I suppose if anybody has any questions, please do come in with them. I suppose the key things to identify, I suppose, can often be castigated, I suppose, as the department, especially in relation to TB. And look, there are people that we know that have major issues with TB outbreaks and so forth. I suppose, is it challenging in Ireland in that we seem to have an awful lot more trading, Damien, than seems to occur in other countries?
Yeah, trade, from a disease point of view, trade is this big, from a biosecurity point of view, isn't good. But trade, look, we all live in the real world as well. The trade is a very important part of the business. And it's just, when that's going on, it just makes it that bit harder to get to grips with something like TB. And movement is a known risk factor in TB. There are several others as well, but it's one of a few. And like the thing about TB, it's very complicated. There are a lot of factors at play here, and movement is one of them. And there's a lot of things to bring under control, and that is definitely one to be considered.
Yeah, and just in relation to, I suppose, the vaccination, I think is interesting. I suppose one question that I get asked regularly, I suppose, is obviously calf scour can be a challenge for people. Should we vaccinate for scour? And many cases, to be honest, my experience has been that people have gone and vaccinated for the scour and they still have the trouble. And often their vet will tell them, like, I mean, just look at it this way, that it would have been a lot worse if you hadn't vaccinated. But from what you're saying there, in reality, there's some other underlying issue on the farm that's potentially resulting in that more so than the failure of the vaccine, really, is it?
Yeah, well, there could be a couple of things at play there, like the major causes of viral scours, it would be rotavirus and coronavirus, and then you've got these vaccines, and the third element, those would be E. coli. Now, if the calves have that, if any one of those three pathogens involved, your calf scour, your vaccine is aimed at those. But the other big one is Cryptosporidia, which the vaccine doesn't cover, right? So, and the point you made there about it being worse, like one of the things I remember reading a study from Canada years ago is that one of the things that they found as a confounding factor in Cryptosporidia scours was actually the use of vaccines for the other thing, right? So the point there that it could be worse, that and these diseases tend to occur as complexes as well, in that particularly say the pneumonia, you've got viruses, bacteria, and then the mycoplasma is there. Likewise in the scours, if you've got 2 or 3 pathogens, they're kind of augmenting the worst effects of each of them. Things could be worse. So it's a point that's well made that things would be worse if you weren't vaccinating. But as you say, there are other things to get right. Timing, make sure that it's given in the right time. I think correcting any mineral imbalances is very important as well as possibly energy balances shouldn't be a problem at that stage. But like and like there is a difference between, say, putting I think to talk about nutritionists sometimes talk about 3 diets: the diet that's calculated, the diet that goes into a feeder waggot or comes out of it, and then the diet that's actually consumed. So all these things kind of come into play,
Yeah, so just a timely question in relation to what you just said there. Joe McMahon is just inquiring, when is the best time to take a blood sample for trace elements, and how many should a person take? You know, that's a tricky question.
Yeah, it's a lot of it will depend on the size of your herd. The best time, I suppose, would be in the dry period before, say, like you'd be hoping to get minerals into the animals 6 weeks before the calf. So in that window between them drying off, and just say kind of early after drying off, like a lot of it depends on the size of your herd, I suppose. But I'd say you get a good. I hate picking a figure, but if I was to pick a figure in a kind of a reasonably sized herds, I'd think close somewhere between 5 and 10.
And I suppose the other thing as well, I think the reason I said it's a tricky question is it comes up often enough. Like, I think you're probably looking at nearly having to take blood samples at a couple of different stages during the year, really, aren't you? Because we'll say, as you said there, no, you're not, in the vast majority of cases, people are actually only just going to have the full herd dry potentially a week or two there around Christmas, where they won't be doing much themselves, maybe trying to enjoy the Christmas period. The minerals should be gone in at that stage. So there's a very tight window of opportunity for whatever feeding has been contributing to minerals prior to that. Well, you see,
that's exactly the point. Is like if you were continuing to feed concentrates, like that's going to give you that's going to kind of unnaturally elevate them, like you're well, not unnatural, nothing unnatural about that, but
it just gives you a false picture potentially.
Yeah, it is. Like really, you want to be finding out what's in the forages, and like, but the important thing is like it's probably now in most parts of the country there's shortages of minerals rather than them being in excess. Although in one or two parts of the country you may have selenium excess, but like minerals, I think minerals are key coming up to calving, because as I alluded to there about the importance of them for the calf vitality, but the other thing that they're important for is uterine involution. And like if you get uterine involution properly without any kind of or the lack of uterine involution, so to speak, that's going to give rise to fertility problems, because you're going to give rise to endometritis and all that. If you get that involution, you're going to get the cow to go a long way to getting herself back in calf on her own.
Yeah, so you have the whole calcium issue, as you mentioned earlier on, where muscle contraction reduces, etc. If they get milk fever, that doesn't help them clear out then as well. And obviously your vitamin E, your antioxidants, that kind of stuff are all important in that as well. There's just, I suppose we'll wrap it up with that. There's just one question there actually that we didn't cover, Damien, as well, is what time are those webinars on next week and tonight?
Yeah, each of those are kicking off at 7 p.m. The registration details are on the let's see, the agriculture pages on the government website.
I'll get them there and I'll send them out on Twitter later on, so we'll be able to share them out that way. Okay.
Yeah.
There's just actually one other question after jumping in there as well, Damien, that might be of interest, because it has come up. I know that in this area that I'm working in down here in Moore Park, Munster Herd Health or Munster Bovine, as they're known, do a good bit of milk analysis, and in the last 2 years they started giving readings in relation to Q fever. Is that something that you have any knowledge in terms of the what people should do, or the issues around it? Sorry for putting you on the spot now, maybe potentially.
I wouldn't be the best person to answer that, but would it be possible for me to find out more for you and get back to you? Or like because it has come up before actually as well now, and as I said, I've thrown that at it wasn't something I thought of actually earlier, but it is an emerging issue, maybe, for want of a better way of describing it, that there are herds in this area getting milk results back at the moment that are saying that they're high in Q fever, and there's a human health issue. There is very much so
with Q fever too. So look, we'll wrap it up with that. I think it's a sign of the value that's been on the topic, I suppose. I mean, that we had 45 people, 50 people there on for the full 45 minutes generally. we find that after half an hour, people have kind of given me the half an hour, and once I go over the half an hour, they decide that they have enough of me for the day and that they go on about their business. So the fact that people have stayed on the whole way through is a sign that there's interest in the topic. So we'll come back to further herd health issues over the course of the next couple of webinars. I suppose just from a pure housekeeping point of view, from my own point of view, for people that aren't aware, our dairy conference has gone back online instead of being face-to-face. It was planned for the Rochestown Park and the Hudson Bay and Athlone next week. So it's going to be spread over Tuesday and Wednesday. And just check out the Teagasc website for the details. We're just adjusting our program slightly there to allow for that. Next week, we're going to be talking to Joe Kelleher. So Joe was a dairy advisor in the Newcastle West office for many years, and Joe is now the organic dairy specialist for working around that area. And Joe is going to come on and talk to us about organic dairying. And to be honest, looking at the front page of the Farmers Journal this morning, it could be all organic next year by the sounds of it, the way the fertilizer prices are going. So please tune in for that next week. I'd just like to thank you very much, Damien, for coming on and for a very interesting presentation. And again, look, I think we'll talk again at some stage over the next 12 months again, maybe to touch on some of the topics that you've touched on there. Some very interesting work going on in the department behind the scenes, I suppose, that a lot of us maybe aren't aware of. And I suppose the key thing that I would say that I would have taken from it today is that if we see something unusual, we need to get it checked out. And I suppose there's always that fear of notifying the department about something, but it could be saving an awful lot of hassle and grief for the entire country. So I suppose it's important to point those things out. So thanks very much again, Damien.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and we wish you well for the week, and we'll see you again next week.
That's all for this week's Let's Talk Dairy webinar series. And don't forget to look out for more bonus episodes each week. I'll be back with our usual Dairy Edge interview on Monday, so do listen in then. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and thanks for listening.